If his speech this evening at the Council on Foreign Relations was a precursor to the handshake at the White House, then Prime Minister Modi may just have made the right noises. United States united against terror, greater cooperation in Pakistan, and a call for better Indo-American ties. He has now landed in Washington with a hope to kickstart a new chapter. But is a completely new chapter really possible?
मैं इस बात में विश्वास करता रहा हूं, जब मैं गुड गवर्नेंस कहता हूं तब मिनिमम गवर्नमेंट, मैक्सिमम गवर्नेंस.
The slogan coined in New Delhi resonated at this packed hall as the Prime Minister addressed a leading think tank, the Council for Foreign Relations in New York. As the crowd waited to get a glimpse of Modi's strategic blueprint, the Prime Minister chose to emphasize on Brand India and his government's mantra.
सरकार अब खुद ने बनाई है, अपनी अच्छा आकांक्षाओं की पूर्ति के लिए बनाई है, उसके कारण जनता के अंदर अपने आप में एक विश्वास पैदा हुआ है.
From development to good governance, Modi unveiling his vision, telling America that he dreamt of building a new neo-middle class.
Neo-middle class. जो लोग गरीबी से बाहर आए हैं, लेकिन अभी मध्यम वर्ग की अवस्था तक पहुंचे नहीं हैं और अब गरीबी में वापस जाना नहीं चाहते. हमने फॉरेन डायरेक्ट इन्वेस्टमेंट के लिए बड़े महत्वपूर्ण इनिशिएटिव पहले ही बजट में ले लिए हैं. भारत का रेलवे तंत्र लोगों का ध्यान नहीं गया है, लेकिन आर्थिक प्रवृत्ति का इससे बड़ा कोई क्षेत्र नहीं हो सकता है.
With renewed thrust on skill development, transparency in administration, the Prime Minister creating a strong vision for India.
भारत युवा देश है. दुनिया की वर्कफोर्स की रिक्वायरमेंट पूरे करने का सामर्थ्य हिंदुस्तान में है. दुनिया को कितने ही प्रकार के लोगों की जरूरत पड़ेगी, उस काम को हम करना चाहते हैं. उसी प्रकार से हम वो भी स्किल डेवलपमेंट करना चाहते हैं कि जिसमें हमारे एंटरप्रेन्योर तैयार हो और वो लोग हो जो जॉब क्रिएटर्स हो.
And then the audience getting a glimpse of what was in store when Modi meets Obama on Tuesday.
टेररिज्म का बड़ संकट, इसको बड़ी गंभीरता से लेने की आवश्यकता है और मुझे दुख के साथ कहना पड़ता है कि दुनिया के बहुत देश वो टेररिज्म के घिनौने रूप को कभी समझ ही नहीं पाए.
From terror to Afghanistan and then China, Modi had a message for Washington.
इतना तेजी से विड्रॉ करने के बाद इराक का जो हाल हुआ, अफगानिस्तान में विड्रॉल की प्रोसेस बहुत स्लो होनी चाहिए. अफगानिस्तान को आपके बल पर खड़े होने देना चाहिए. चाइना है, हमारे बॉर्डर के विवाद है, आज भी है, लेकिन उस विवाद भी हमने चाइना से हमारे व्यापारिक संबंधों को और बढ़ाया है, हमारे राजनीतिक संबंधों को हमने और बढ़ाया है.
Business, trade to strategic ties, Modi has outlined what India hopes to raise with Obama in few hours from now, as New Delhi hopes to start a fresh chapter in Indo-American relationship. Bureau Report, Times Now.
On the Newshour panel in Washington, Bill Clifford, President and CEO, World Affairs Councils of America; Jeff Smith, a Director, South Asia Program, a Kramer Strategy Fellow of the American Foreign Policy Council; Dr. Bruce Jones, Senior Fellow and Deputy Director of Foreign Policy Program and Director of the Project on International Order and Strategy, the Brookings Institution; Frederick Greer, Senior Associate Director, South Asia Program of the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace; Ambassador Mark Lagan, Professor in the Practice of International Affairs at Georgetown University, a Senior Fellow at the Council on Foreign Relations and a former US diplomat.
You're watching the first Newshour Debate on the Newshour Washington DC edition with Arnab Goswami.
Okay, let me introduce my panel. We have a power-packed panel to give you a sense of how people here in Washington are looking at Narendra Modi's visit. To my right, we have Bill Clifford. He's President and CEO of the World Affairs Council of America. Bill, thank you very much. It's great to see you. Frederick Greer, to his right, is Senior Associate Director of the South Asia Program at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. Thank you very much, Frederick. Good to see you as well. And to his right is Jeff Smith. Jeff is the director of the South Asia programs at the Kramer Strategy Fellow at the American Foreign Policy Council. Jeff, it's great to see you. This is going to be a big day for the India-America relationship. To my left is Dr. Bruce Jones. He's a senior fellow and deputy director, Foreign Policy Program, and director of the Project on International Order and Strategy at the Brookings Institution. Dr. Bruce.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much for coming. Well, thank you for coming. All of India is watching us today, and they'll want to know what each one of you has to say about the way things could go today. Ambassador Mark Lagon is professor in the practice of international affairs at Georgetown University, adjunct senior fellow at the Council on Foreign Relations, and a former U.S. diplomat, of course. Ambassador, thank you for gracing the occasion. And of course, Maruf Raza, a strategic affairs expert, my friend, and someone I now always introduce very simply as India's most trusted voice on strategic affairs. Maruf, thank you. Okay, Bill, we'll keep it simple, we'll keep it informal. Please feel free to interject. Basic question is this: how much interest is there in this Washington leg of his visit and in what Modi and Obama may achieve together, Bill?
Well, Arnab, we're not going to see 20,000 people in the White House or in the Capitol like we did in Madison Square Garden. However, there's tremendous interest here. This is an opportunity for India and for the Prime Minister to really begin to rejuvenate a frayed strategic partnership over the last couple of years. There's a great opportunity because there's been tremendous bipartisan support over the last several administrations and also on the Hill, and he'll be meeting Congress as well as part of this. And of course, there's a charm offensive that we expect to see when Prime Minister Modi engages the business community as well.
Is America too distracted? That question goes to any one of you, can pick that around. Some people say this couldn't have been a worse time. You agree for Modi to be coming here with Obama so embedded into several other issues and ISIS and the criticism his government is facing for the handling of these issues. Is that the way you'd look at it here, or is that cynicism not justified, Ambassador?
Well, I think that actually it is a good time. The agenda may end up being different, as you suggest in your lead-in, with a focus on ISIS or implications for the counterterrorism policy that might be enhanced by this moment. But I don't think it's a bad time. There are any number of reasons to try and drive further into a geostrategic relationship between the two, to go beyond sort of a stalled relationship of the past, and to perhaps talk about the two countries' respective views of China as a rising power.
Why has it been stalled? What is the principal reason this table, people, all of you around the table, feel the relationship has been stalled? I've been hearing this wherever we've gone, that the relationship has not lived up to its potential. Some of those who I met in New York said that every few years America believes it can make a fresh start with India, and yet there is disappointment at the end of the day on both sides. Why is this the case, Jeff?
Well, I think expectations were raised very high in 2005 when we signed a civil nuclear deal and a 10-year defense partnership agreement. There was a tremendous amount of energy in the relationship and inspiration in the relationship. And one of the things that really began to drain some of that momentum was the 2008 financial crisis, when you saw both countries really make an inward turn toward domestic politics and economic performance. And I think that sapped the motivation behind this foreign policy engagement to some degree. And then you had a litany of minor and some more major hiccups in the relationship. The Cobra Gate affair, the MMRCA deal, some disagreements about the pace of withdrawal from Afghanistan, and taken together, I think, these eventually drain some of that momentum.
Yeah, but no relationship should be hinged only on one issue. And don't you feel, Frederick, that there was too much emphasis given on the Indo-US nuclear deal,
Well, there was probably too much emphasis given to the U.S. nuclear deal, but at the same time, this was the reversal of decades of U.S. non-proliferation policies. So this was certainly a big effort on the part of the U.S. to reach out to India, and the expectation were accordingly high. So when the first thing India does right after is to vote the liability clause, which de facto kills the deal for any practical purpose, and we have seen no development since then of course the momentum falls down. Then since then we have had, of course, the diminishing of the India's growth rate. India suddenly became less attractive. So both at the strategic level as well at the economic level, all the actors who actually supported the deal felt a bit frustrated about it.
Right, so everything was falling well together around 2008, 9, 10. But I think one thing which I don't know if it's much attention given to it, for any relationship to be successful and for critical decisions to be taken to push that relationship, you have to have a strong political leadership on both sides. And Dr. Bruce, I don't know whether Washington is aware of the fact that since 2010-11, Manmohan Singh himself, in his second term as Prime Minister, was much weakened after the corruption scandals of 2010. Maybe that took away some of the inertia that was built up in 2008-9.
I think that's fair, but I think it's also true to say that the attention and the understanding of India in this capital is still fairly slim. You don't have a senior advisor to the president in the White House on India. There's no special assistant on India in the White House in the same way you would have it on some of the other relationships. There isn't an infrastructure that sustains that relationship through this turbulence. And I think one of the key things in this trip, you'll have the effort to build a personal relationship between the two individuals, between Obama and Modi. But if they're going to sustain it and not see this kind of slip back and fall away from high expectations, they're going to have to invest in finding ways to build the kind of structures and patterns that can sustain the relationship through difficult times. The two countries have an enormous possibility, but they also disagree very importantly on some major issues, and they're going to have to work through those over time.
We were talking to Stephen Cohen earlier today, and when I asked him that, Dr. Cohen, in your view, what really is going to be the starting point of this conversation, and he said that I'm going to be very interested in knowing who your full-time next defense minister is going to be, though we have a defense minister who's also a finance minister. I think he was using that as a case in point. He said everything depends on the defense ties between the two countries, and the business potential, Maruf, he said, of that was very tremendous. But what worried me with the follow-up to what he said, I asked him, so that's business, why would it be linked to a strategic relationship? And Maruf, maybe you can tell all our panelists what he said. He said that, well, America would expect India to be more in line with its own vision of the world.
Well, that is really a problem.
That's the problem area.
I think that's the big problem area. I mean, you said the right thing, because one of the prices that you pay for dealing with a democracy is you have a multiple set of opinions, you have disagreement, and if you want us to take the democratic route of putting legislation and other things in place, this leads to a lot of dissent within our polity. Now, coincidentally, let me first say the flip side of things and then give you the good picture. Coincidentally, when we were debating the nuclear liability laws, unfortunately, the ghost of the Bhopal tragedy once again hit our public perception, and it became a matter of debate which influenced a lot of politicians into trying to sort of block the liability or make it much, much more difficult for anybody to come in to do nuclear business in India. Having said that, I think there are a lot of positives that have happened in the last 10 years.
No, but just one point. It was just ahead. Look at the timing of that, Maruf. It was 2013. Manmohan Singh was about to visit Washington, and there was a huge row, you may be aware of, when it was emerged that the government may use some opinion rendered by the Attorney General of India, the late Ghulam Vanawati, to ease the supplier's liability. So it wasn't as if Manmohan Singh was not trying. In fact, the criticism was Manmohan Singh was trying to get the liability clause diluted, but through the back door. And the BJP then was the opposition party. It was up in arms, forcing the government to clarify that there was no such move. I don't think the BJP, having done that, now that it is back in power, will be in any position.
But let me
to dilute this liability clause. So just before you move on, Maruf,
I need to complete one point.
Okay,
I need to complete one point. That having said that, there's been a lot of movement on the positives. America has become India's largest defense supplier. It's a market which is still expanding. It's the world's largest defense importer. American technology transfers to India are beginning to take place. There is, and I'm personally, rather critical of many foreign policy issues, but let me tell you, I think give or take a little, there is the biggest possibility of India moving onto the world stage as a friend of America and not opposing America. I think we need to understand that not enough has been done to put that picture across amongst those in Washington who just see the mother of all military deals, that is the new MMRCA deal not having gone through, but you got a lot of stuff almost to the similar amount through the FMS deals.
Okay, I think we are getting a response from this side. Why don't you respond?
I've been very encouraged by the growth in the defense relationship. I mean, if you go back to 2005, 2006, our defense trade was $0.
Yes.
$0. It was $11 billion by 2011. I mean, if you take a long sweep, if you look at the relationship in the long sweep of history, progress has been absolutely remarkable. And I think people who argue that the U.S.-India relationship has been oversold are inflating the costs of the relationship and underappreciating the benefits. I think that they're especially inflating the costs because when you look at what has the U.S.-India relationship cost the United States, it's been nothing. There are some things that some benefits that we haven't realized, like arms deals, but that's natural to happen in a relationship. So I think you're right to dwell on these positive aspects, and I think we have made progress. Sometimes we get a little too focused on short-term agenda items, but in the long sweep of things.
So why raise items in which there's going to be no movement? So that's
because there is genuine disappointment here.
Well, I'm sure there is, but the view is if the BJP were to dilute even 1% or 0.5% on the nuclear liability clause, because last time it was the 27th of September, Frederick, Bill, I'd like your response to that. 27th September, I remember Manmohan Singh was about to come here, and there was such a hue and cry. It was a build-up to an election, and the BJP said you're selling away India's strategic interests just because you want to carry a gift for certain American companies. So, is there going to be that empathy that, having taken a position, Modi can't dilute that issue? Because the Congress will then turn around and say, you never had a consistency on your foreign policy, now you're doing a sellout. Can these kind of prickly issues be taken off the table? Can you just take it off the table, perhaps?
Well, I think that you're defining the difficulty that Mr. Modi will find in meeting Mr. Obama. The issue will be how do we define a relationship that will help bypass all the difficulties that happened in the past. But at the same time, you're making the question and the answer, meaning on the one side you say, well, there was a lot of goodwill, but at the same time, the very BJP, which today is asking for more cooperation, more technology transfer, more like everything else the previous governor has asked before him, then shot itself in the foot. Then, well, there is also an Indian dimension to that. That shouldn't be, I think, eaten under the carpet under the pretext that Mr. Modi is visiting. Precisely what President Obama and Prime Minister Modi will have to do is define this working relationship that will help them overcome the difficulties that have been created in the past. If we try to look at things positively, that's the way we look at it.
No, the reason I've harped on this nuclear liability issue, because almost everyone with an interest in India seems to be at least talking about it, and there's a lot of commentary in this country on the nuclear liability.
It was so central to really establishing the dialogue when they did this nuclear agreement, and so the promise was kind of faded from.
Tell me, Bill, what would President Obama want from his perspective and the American perspective as any commitments, guarantees, or specifics in terms of movement forward in this?
I can't say that I know that there is a specific goal on this issue, and I don't.
No, not this issue. And broadly on the relationship.
Broadly, I think what you've talked about, and Jeff made this point about the short-termism. I think really what this is about is setting up a broader vision. Those things will be mentioned, those will acknowledge the differences like this, but I think what this conversation has to be between President Obama and Prime Minister Modi is really much more, what future role does India see in the Indian Ocean region? What future role are they going to play in upholding the liberal economic order?
Yeah, Ambassador.
It strikes me that there are three options in this relationship. There is getting caught in the mire of the continued discussion over the civilian nuclear cooperation, which is unlikely to move quickly to resolution. There are other strategic issues, such as counterterrorism partnership or how the two powers look at a rising China. But what's interesting is, what are the third basket of issues that are not the non-nuclear strategic issues? And I think a really important aspect of this ties together governance and economics, where the bloom is off the rose of the American neoliberal economic model after 2008 and 2009. China has risen up as a model for economic growth. India and the United States could make the case that democratic governance, pluralism are the bases for economic success and economic growth. One problem is that both the United States and India at this time have mixed feelings about pluralism. President Obama is focusing on counterterrorism rather than a democracy and human rights theme at the moment, and a BJP leader in India will always be a difficult interlocutor for the United States on the question of pluralism, because there'll be the perception that perhaps pluralism isn't at the top of Modi's personal agenda, given the difficult past of his own leadership in Gujarat in 2002.
Well, I take your point, but there's a bigger fight out there. I thought there is a bigger agenda, and I like the point that you made there on terrorism, because that is one issue that can really bring both the countries together. I was seeing, we were very closely seeing what he had to say about ISIS at the CFR. And he made the point on ISIS, Modi, and he said the beheadings are unacceptable, and we must work together, he said, to take on this threat. Now, gentlemen, as you are aware, the ISIS in some of its recent propagandas, has strongly mentioned India, and though some people feel that's more propaganda than real, for now, both the ISIS and the Al-Qaeda have referred to India as part of their global design. So there is a vested Indian interest in working together on ISIS. My question to you would be, would an Indo-US strategic relationship entail cooperation vis-a-vis the ISIS?
I think it would, and I think that the Obama administration is going to be looking for a signal from Modi that it's willing to do something on the ISIS question. Mark is right about some of the options that we confront, but certainly I think from the White House perspective right now, they're very much in a realist mode of trying to craft the right kinds of relations with great powers and to kind of squelch the threat of ISIS and of other forms of terrorism in the Middle East. Modi's on a world tour projecting an image of India as a great power, projecting the kind of energy and dynamism of India. Obama's going to ask, well, what are you prepared to contribute on ISIS?
So
and
what
I suspect
do you think
also, by the way, on Ebola. There's another major crisis the United States is thrusting itself into.
Yeah, but let's look at ISIS. India turned down an offer to join the coalition forces in Iraq in 2003.
Sure.
There was also, Maruf, as you may mention, an offer in Afghanistan, which had come up many years back, I think, when Atal Bihari Vajpayee was the Prime Minister of India. So what if Modi's cooperation is sought? Surely America would know that India has been very reluctant.
Well, one of the reasons India has been reluctant, I mean, there's a lot of important points that are coming out from the brilliance on this table, not minus myself. But let me say, as far as cooperation with fighting ISIS or greater involvement in Afghanistan, I mean, outside of the Western world, India has put in the biggest effort in Afghanistan in financial terms, in terms of rehabilitation, building, etc. But having said that, one of the issues why the Indian military asked the then government very clear questions about involvement in Afghanistan was basically on three terms of reference. Who's going to be in command? Who's going to pay the bills? What's the exit time frame? So if you can't define that, we have
but the Bush administration made a very specific request. They said we want 17,000 troops. They said we want it in the Kurdish region, a region around Mosul, and they had exerted considerable influence on Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee to do so. But we were not willing to get involved.
It was not about Iraq, Arnab. This claim by the military, this claim by the military was on Afghanistan. In Iraq, we had long experience of having trained the Iraqi army. We used to have training teams, and people were willing to go. The government was a little reluctant, but I I think there's the other issue that I want to just delve upon for a moment, and that is the Indian Ocean cooperation there. I think there is a serious problem there in understanding each other's views and perceptions. America wants India to become a partner in a larger sort of Asian game that needs to be played now to counter China's increasing influence. But please understand India's concerns. One is that India feels America has always been pressurized by a paranoid Pakistani military not to get too close to India. And simultaneously, India's deeper involvement with America brings pressure on India from the Chinese, and India doesn't know if push comes to shove, if the United States is going to stand by India if things get out of control. Because that was the experience that Japan had more recently. So there are problem areas which need to be also, Washington needs to give a much, much stronger signal that if it wishes to see India as a strategic partner, what is the level to which Washington wishes to get involved in our problems, considering that you have a number of preoccupations right now which are much...
Pakistan comes up again and again in our conversation because Pakistan's policy essentially of bleeding India with 1,000 cuts has never quite ceased. And that continues to be one of the greatest worries. And the reason why it is of such worry to India is because we came very close to being forced to retaliate after the 26/11 attacks in Mumbai, in which 6 American citizens were also killed. And there is a section in India which feels very worried that public opinion will be so strongly against Pakistan, even if forces they call as non-state actors were to try to do something like this. So there's always a feeling that you're living on the edge, almost in the subcontinent. What can America do if Modi asks Obama, what can you do to exert your considerable economic influence over Pakistan to bring them to understand? What can Obama say or do?
I would say sometimes there's an inflated perception of our influence over Islamabad. I mean, if we were able to...
You don't have to be modest on that, Jeff. Pakistan survives because of American dollars. You take your hundreds of millions of dollars out and the Pakistani economy will be bankrupt overnight.
Well, we haven't been able to prevent them from undermining our own war effort in Afghanistan for 10 years. So I think it's very clear that there are limitations on our ability to influence Afghanistan.
But as you can make out, both from the content and tenor of what Maruf says, and gentlemen, let me say Maruf does represent very strongly the Indian political opinion, public opinion on this subject. Well, it's a touchy issue.
A question I have actually is to turn that around a little bit, which is, here's India on the world stage as a great power. What does India want to do about its relationship with Pakistan?
Well, I think Maruf could better answer that, but if you want a very succinct reply, I think it is reflected in Modi's speech at the UN General Assembly, where he says we want to have a serious bilateral talks, but you have to create a conducive atmosphere. You can't do the childish thing of coming to Delhi and then holding talks with 5 separatists who have never got 5 votes in Kashmir. That's provocation, that's needling, that's not a mature diplomacy. But I come back to the point. No, I don't think our American interlocutors should be allowed to get off the hook on this one so easily, Maruf. My question is the influence which everyone wants to know this. Your country has a huge amount of influence on Pakistan, and you can't get away.
The reality lies somewhere between the way you cast it and some of our American colleagues do. There has been a way in which the policy community in Washington has thrown up its hands that nothing can be done about Pakistan, that there are too many different players, some elements of the military and the intelligence community there that we can never get under control.
Yeah.
It is worth asking the question whether the United States has the will to pressure
What do you
Pakistan.
think, Ambassador?
I mean, after all, the United States bankrolled Egypt for 2 decades, and it seemed like it was as if Mubarak was the one that had the upper hand in the relationship. The United States might have some more tart messages that it could deliver if it wants to make sure things don't get out of control in the bilateral relationship between Pakistan and India.
Yeah.
In the spirit of controversy that you called for before the program, then...
Please don't. If you don't, I'm not forcing you towards it.
I'd like to say that I do have some sympathies for the Indian position on that, precisely because I think a lot of mistake has been done with Pakistan. In particular, the idea that somehow a change of perception of Pakistan's strategic environment could be bought off through billions of dollars and so on. That said, and I tend to agree with the ambassador, there's never been much willingness to pressure Pakistan. There has always been an exaggerated sense of the fragility of Pakistan, a sense that the Pakistanis themselves were happy to cultivate and did so remarkably well. There is also this perception in India, and I tend to agree with that there is no consistent Pakistani policy, therefore it's very difficult to articulate a very coherent...
There is one.
There is not one. I mean, you've got many constituencies in Pakistan and none of their interests really overlap.
No, there is the interest of the Pakistani military which is consistent.
Well, but it doesn't overlap with the interests of the others.
Well, they are the key player.
I would agree with that,
They are the key player in Pakistan. I mean, if I might interrupt, sir.
Let him complete. Let Frederick complete. Come back.
So the last thing is, perhaps, after all, if no policy works on Pakistan, perhaps an absence of policy would be a pretty efficient policy itself. Benign neglect could...
Brilliant.
And this is something which has been trying to pass. If you remember, 2001, we're almost there and didn't work out because of 9/11 and so on.
In fact, sir, with respects, I really appreciate the point you last made, because I have just written about it about a month ago to say precisely that there is one option that has not been considered. And that is an option to ignore Pakistan completely.
It's not.
In a sense,
that's not going to make the ISI change its visceral hatred for India.
The ISI can be disciplined in several other ways. I mean, if you read Carlotta Gall's book, The Wrong Enemy, if you read Christine Fair's book, Fighting to the Finish, about the Pakistan Army, there are certain consistencies in their system which is going to take a long time even for a powerful country like the United States to turn them around. But the fact of the matter is that Pakistanis, and I don't want to make this an India-Pakistan debate, but Pakistanis, unfortunately, have not been made to feel the pain. So if the pressure is not brought on them sufficiently, Pakistan can get away with the fact that they will continue to fight under a so-called nuclear umbrella and do what they want. But the bigger issue is, and I think Mr. Modi spelled it out at the Council of Foreign Relations,
yes, he did,
that India wants bilateral ties with everybody in the region. India wants to set up a satellite for the South countries. So India wants the region to communicate, but communicate government to government, not government to a separatist outfit.
But Maruf, we are also at a unique inflection time, and I want to get Dr. Jones back into the conversation. We are at an important time because America is planning to withdraw from Afghanistan. I don't know the exact numbers, Dr. Jones, but someone told me it could be less than 10,000 troops on the ground. Now, given the kind of commitment you had, the footfall you had some time back, that's really scaling it down. Now, I found it very, very interesting what Modi said on Afghanistan. Modi basically said Afghanistan is a big example of cooperation between India and America. He also said that the United States, I thought that was a very sort of charitable comment from him, and I actually felt he was being more charitable than is necessary to the Americans on that one, where he may have surprised quite a few Americans by saying that the Obama government has brought a great amount of stability to Afghanistan. I mean, if there are... I thought at a time like this, and we were joking that, Obama needs all the help he can, then he should actually make a big PR drive out of the fact that Indian Prime Minister says that you brought stability to Afghanistan. But having said that, on a more serious note, Dr. Bruce Jones, he says the process of withdrawal has to be very slow. Don't go away just yet. Don't repeat the mistake you made in Iraq. And that's how you'll be able to stop the Taliban. Now, Obama is going to have to go. Is Modi hinting at a possible, stronger Indian presence, a greater role for India in Afghanistan's future, post or during this phase of the American withdrawal, which will also solve another problem, that we'll be able to encircle Pakistan strategically?
Well, we'll have to see how it plays out, but I think that, let me make a couple points here. First of all, I think it's a reasonable point for Prime Minister Modi to make to President Obama, that if you're saying we should have a kind of strategic partnership and you're worried about China and you want us to play a certain kind of role, that you're going to have to take our interests in Afghanistan very seriously. And I think that if you look at the history of this over the last 10 years, it has been the case that the United States has not privileged or even particularly taken seriously India's concerns and viewpoints in terms of Afghanistan. And I think that's been a mistake. And it's been part of what we were talking about before in terms of the issues that have eroded the relationship. I think the Indians see quite clearly the United States isn't looking at the region and seeing India as the primary partnership and worrying about how to work together to handle problems in the region. Rather, Afghanistan has been the focus, and India and Pakistan were sort of both elements of that puzzle. So I think it's a fair question. Second point I want to make, though, is every Indian you'll talk to about foreign policy will emphasize how much it's a problem that the United States always focuses on India as a South Asian actor rather than a global actor. But then the second part of the discussion is always about Pakistan, as we've seen on this panel already today. It comes back to Pakistan all the time.
Dr. Jones, let me tell you, I wish we did not have to. But unfortunately, Pakistan has made itself such an embarrassing diplomatic specimen, and it runs its affairs in such an unfortunate manner. And we have actually suffered so much because of it. I can assure you many Indians would rather not talk about the troubles of Pakistan, but they happen to be our neighbors. And there is a constant suffering the people of India
and that will continue.
Have because
but
of
I do
terrorism.
think it does go to this point that finding some other projects, ISIS might be one, China is one, Maritime, Indian Ocean, whatever the difficulties
without
and the
a
differences
guarantee
are,
on Pakistan, without a cooperation,
it'll have to be part of the equation. It cannot be that the relationship continues just focused on South Asia.
I understand.
It's going to be very important to find other issues beyond the region in which the United States and India can build up a pattern of cooperation.
And that's what I actually was hinting at when I mentioned Afghanistan, because you see, Bill, we have a direct stake in Afghanistan's stability that stems from the threat of the Taliban, that stems from the threat of ISI-backed terror groups like the Haqqani network. So, you know,
I think making investments in Afghanistan would be a very positive development for India and the Afghans.
Why do you think Modi made that point? Why? I know what is your view? Why? What was the tactical point the Indian Prime Minister made there on Afghanistan when he made?
Well, I think as we said, it is to broaden the optics of just a pure bilateral problem with India and Pakistan.
Pakistan.
Yeah, it is that. It is to show that it's a responsible regional player. It is to show that it is helping the United States as it disengages a large democracy going in and trying to have weight in a troubled country.
Jeff.
It was a mixed message from him, and I think we should not be hesitant to emphasize that we appreciate public shows of support from world leaders on contentious issues, because we have a lot of allies in the world who don't come out in front of the camera and say America has done a great deal of good.
You know, he actually, I thought with those comments that he made on the ISIS, that's as good as saying that India supports the international effort, and we categorically back the airstrikes against ISIS in Iraq and Syria. Indian Prime Minister saying it does amount to that. So I think he's actually reaching out quite a bit, isn't he, Frederick? He's already reaching out.
He's reaching out, but at the same time, he's speaking in terms of self-interest as well. I mean, we know full well that everybody in India fear that, Indian extremists might themselves go to Iraq, might themselves go to Syria and then come back at some stage.
Of course.
So this is a collective interest and this is a collective effort. So it does make sense to work in that perspective.
Yes, Maruf.
On the issue of ISIS, I think, one of the points that we need to understand that India has one of the largest Muslim populations in the world.
That's right.
And India has been seeing ISIS slowly and steadily beginning to make inroads in the minds of certain youth. We've had more than 25,000 clerics who have been trained in Saudi Arabia in one way or the other, visiting India in the last year or two, and they have held gatherings of 1.2 million people and trying to influence them into a mindset which eventually leads to possible recruitment ground for ISIS. So it's a bigger worry with us, and we are trying to get involved in that process in a slow and steady manner.
That's right.
But equally importantly is the fact that as far as Afghanistan is concerned, and I want to be a bit more charitable to Pakistan on this one, which I normally am not, that I think Pakistan should be given a bigger role to play in Afghanistan. The problem is that Pakistanis themselves admit to me that no Afghan likes them. though they want to play a big role out there. So I would see Afghanistan, after the United States' withdrawal, become a kind of major international undertaking where there could be many forces. And please remember that Indian and Pakistani troops have worked pretty well in UN peacekeeping operations under the single flag of the UN, under similar commanders. Right? But having said that, my last point...
Maruf, you cannot imagine that Indian and Pakistani forces will ever work together.
No, they worked, Arnab. They worked in Afghanistan. They worked in Sudan. Yeah. They worked in Ethiopia. Yeah. They worked in various other UN operations in Africa. And I've got records with me to show that they worked very well. But having said that, I think the big role that US and India can actually look at playing together, and this is what I would like to respond to this distinguished audience, that I think there is room for cooperation because we're already doing military-to-military exercises of a large number. The problem is, I think Mr. Obama and his team must make it known to Mr. Modi that the biggest stumbling block for Indo-US military cooperation is the Indian defense bureaucracy.
The starting point will have to be Pakistan. And nobody wants a duality in the relationship, but a country of 1.2 billion people cannot live in the fear of major terror attacks done by a country which has got America's patronage, willy-nilly.
The News Hour in Washington, D.C. edition with Arnab Goswami. We'll be right back after the break.
Presented by Amity University, a leading research and innovation-driven university. Powered by Havells LED. Happy lighting. In association with Ciaz. Make way.
J. Hampstead, a different league.
खेले है ये छुपन छुपाई बारी सतरंगी की आई भागे टोली पीछे पीछे सपने बैठे आंखें नीचे रंगों का मेला है रोशनी का खेला है रंगों का मेला है रोशनी का खेला है
The brightest color celebration with new triluminous LED. Sony.
हेलो, चैनल बेशक स्टैंडर्ड हो पर आपका इंप्रेशन हो सकता है हाई डेफिनेशन। घर पे लगाइए नेरोलैक इंप्रेशंस हाई डेफिनेशन कलर्स और बढ़ाइए अपना इंप्रेशन।
HP, India's #1 desktop, notebook and printer.
4 फुट 4 दीवार पे प्यार का सितार दीवार पे मेहमान भी कलाकार दीवार पे इसलिए पर्चर इजी क्लीन पेंट दीवार पे न दाग न धब्बा ओनली ब्यूटीफुल वॉल्स।
अब ये कल से टॉप करेगा ना?
ये तो आप मानोगे कि इतनी जल्दी रिजल्ट्स नहीं मिलते, लेकिन अगर मैं यही बात आपसे इक्विटी म्यूचुअल फंड्स के लिए कहूँ तो आप मानोगे। अच्छे रिटर्न्स पाने के लिए टाइम दीजिए। लॉग ऑन टू जानोतोमानो.com फ्रॉम बिरला सन लाइफ म्यूचुअल फंड। म्यूचुअल फंड इन्वेस्टमेंट्स आर सब्जेक्ट टू मार्केट रिस्क्स। रीड ऑल स्कीम रिलेटेड डॉक्यूमेंट्स केयरफुली।
Did you see the match, baby?
CFL?
No, baby, IPL. CFL, baby, I almost...
मुझे पता था हमें अंधेरे में खाना पड़ेगा। एक पल भी चेंज नहीं कर सकता। फिलिप्स LED? लेकिन मैंने तो
चेंज कर दिया। तुम्हारा मूड और बिजली का बिल भी।
इतना महंगा?
पर इससे लंबा चलेगा।
गुड बॉय। अब पूरे घर के बदलो।
अब CFL फ्यूज होने का मतलब फिलिप्स LED लगाने का चांस, जो देता है 50% सेविंग्स 15 साल तक।
गेम अच्छा था।
फिलिप्स LED, चेंज करो, सेव करो।
Innovation in you. Philips.
Reliance Trends has been extremely supportive of everything new that I do. Whether it was my music, whether it's my films. I love Lauren's collection. What I really like about it is they're very wearable clothes.
I'm extremely proud to be a part of this show with Reliance Trends and of course having Priyanka as the showstopper.
I love the fact that this is a mix of fancy and chic. It's great that anyone can wear this and really feel comfortable and fabulous.
छोटे, आपको इनके फ्यूचर के लिए कितना SIP करना चाहिए? इक्विटी म्यूचुअल फंड में निवेश के लिए राइट सिस्टमैटिक इन्वेस्टमेंट प्लान अमाउंट जानना जरूरी है। www.icici-mf.com.
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.
If you love easy, you'll love the new Vento. With a smooth 7-speed automatic DSG transmission. Drive easy. Drive ahead.
Volkswagen, das Auto.
You're watching the News Hour Washington DC edition with Arnab Goswami.
A question was asked at the Council for Foreign Relations that Mr. Modi, what do you think about international arbitration to resolve your border dispute? And he said it very smartly. He said, we have a bilateral relationship. We don't need any kind of intervention there. Now, this visit comes in the immediate backdrop, as you know, Ambassador, of President Xi Jinping's visit to India. And America has long seen India as some kind of a counterforce, I presume, to China in the region. Modi wants to improve ties. He wants to improve the bilateral relationship. And Chuck Hagel himself recently said, when he was asked, that India will not have to choose between Washington and Beijing. Ambassador, let me start this part of this conversation with you.
Publicly, it just would rather it be quietly whispered in the ear of the president, "We're with you."
You know how it is done, Ambassador.
No, but so, okay, so are you basically saying that India therefore has to become a tactical ally of America in the region?
Well, I think it's very much in the interests of India to hedge its bets about negative and pernicious effects of China's rise as a geostrategic player. There's much more than the very long border between the two countries. If you look at the larger picture of China's flexing its muscles and its own military's inclinations with respect to the South China Sea, with respect to Japan, it is wise to try and sustain economic relations with both other powers, if you're India. But I think it really needs to see that its bigger stake in terms of interests is developing more of a working relationship with the United States. This isn't going to be something that is likely to leap into a military conflict with China. It's the very reason for aligning with the United States lying in deterring anything like that happening with Beijing.
Okay, so in terms of specifics, what will that mean?
In his op-ed in the Wall Street Journal, had a hint of a similar nature. You talked about the hints he had at his Council on Foreign Relations piece on ISIS. In his Wall Street Journal op-ed, he talked about, and very briefly, but notably, about India playing an important role in the stability of East Asia. It was a very different formulation than an Indian Prime Minister has had before, and clearly China was the reference.
So then I presume people in Washington would be very happy with the fact that, during the time that Xi Jinping was in India, China was making incursions into Indian territory, and it became controversial. No, it did spoil the atmospherics of there were 2-day trip. First day was fantastic, and the second day was a washout principally for this reason.
So I've watched this border issue closely. I've traveled to the border, including in Ladakh, where this incident happened. Yes. I don't think I would characterize the U.S. as being happy when these border incursions happen. I don't think in fact, our officials state repeatedly that we encourage better relations between China and India. Our desire is not to see antagonism in that relationship, and it is not to partner with India to contain China. I think what people here do see is that in the event that China's rise becomes more belligerent, more aggressive externally, it would behoove both of our countries to be on the same page on certain strategic issues. But I don't think there's any offensive intent or any design to encircle China.
But there will have to be a deep sense of trust. And I know you referred to the Khobragade affair. And then there were these reports that the Indian embassy was also snooped on. And I believe, Bill, it could also be a result of everything going badly, like a economic downturn in India, the economic crisis here, the nuclear deal not happening, a weakened Indian political leadership. Everything could have come together. But where do we build that deep trust? Because if you are to work together as a strategic partnership, I presume there will have to be many particular boxes which will have to be crossed, which have not been crossed in terms of what this relationship will be about militarily, in terms of intelligence cooperation, transfer of technology, and otherwise. How do you, as I wrap this up, my question to both of you is, what is the best way to build trust between these two countries, which really has been missing?
Trust between
India and America. India and China will take a little longer.
Yes. I was going to say, I mean, it's not just at the top. It's all people-to-people relationships as well. And I think, one thing that India has in common with China right now is both are advocating a sort of foreign policy begins at home. They're building their domestic economies. They're trying to engage populations that have been not part of the wealth-making machine, and both Xi and Prime Minister Modi are in intense battles against corruption. That is where they can make a lot of progress. Actually, I think changing the business rules in India will encourage the investment, which will reverse. I mean, it's sort of chicken and the egg, if you will. You need to see growth rates that exceed 5%. That'll attract more money, but you'll have this virtuous cycle. I think also, just circling back a little bit to what Maruf said about the large Muslim youth population, or just youth population in general in India, 65% under age 35, 12 million people, 12 million youth entering the labor force annually. These people need jobs. That's going to create a rich democracy, a rich market.
Yeah, you wanted to come in and
I think the basis for building this relationship is on economic grounds between the United States and India. Yeah. India could be an enormously important economic model for the world. Yeah. It needs to convince the American business community that, in fact, it's better to try and work with a democracy despite its bureaucracy than to try and navigate the corruption and illiberal governance in China. But it does require some steps, some confidence-building measures by India to signal that it wants to move forward to deepen that economic relationship and the technology transfers.
Well, I feel here, for Modi, this is a very big reach out. Frederick, in none of the bilaterals or visits that he has had, has there been such a strong pitch from his side at rebuilding the relationship as it has been with America. And I think with that also comes, Frederick, the opportunity for America to step up to the plate and do its own bit in rebuilding the relationship. Sorry to harp on that point, but it is going to have to be, the starting point will have to be Pakistan. And nobody wants a duality in the relationship, but a country of 1.2 billion people cannot live in the fear of major terror attacks done by a country which has got America's patronage, willy-nilly. That's,
Well, this is true and not true, because India itself, I come to the conclusion that it can live with Pakistan. It can live uncomfortably. It doesn't like the situation as it is, but it can live with it. So if both countries can make part of the way, then I think this shouldn't be, if it's not really an area of convergence, at least it shouldn't be a major hurdle in the development of the relationship. I don't think that Pakistan will be the major obstacle to development of the better. No, and I tend to agree with the ambassador. The real sound basis for development of relation is the economy.
Well, yes.
And I would add an issue, which is energy. The United States is about to become the world's largest energy exporter, overtaking Russia and Saudi Arabia. India has 400 million people without access to modern energy. It needs tech transfer, it needs support to solve that problem. It cannot grow past a certain point without tackling that problem, and the United States is the most reliable partner we would find in dealing with energy issues. And that's an issue which is strategic. It has a government-to-government dimension, it has an economic dimension, and it has a people-to-people dimension. Absolutely. So the energy piece, I think, is a critically important building block for the relationship.
Well, I think there are many critical building blocks. The potential is absolutely tremendous out there. But bottom line is this: America also needs to look at India differently as a country which now will not ask but seek, rightly so, its place in the global elite. Thank you very much, gentlemen. I've really enjoyed this conversation, and let us see what comes out of the meeting between Modi and Obama. Thank you very much, and thank you for joining.